Good evening and welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Thursday, July 24th. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, joined tonight by Carl Cannon. He's our Washington bureau chief and executive editor, and Philip Wegman, our White House reporter, sitting in for Andrew Walworth. So guys, Russiagate continues to occupy a lot of the attention, certainly of the conservative media landscape and also the White House. And Phil, you were in the press briefing room yesterday and actually asked a question of DNI Tulsi Gabbard, who was there at this briefing. Give us a sense of what that was like. What's the mood in the room among the press corps and also among the staffers and the press secretary and obviously Tulsi Gabbard herself?
So the most obvious question is why now? Because Donald Trump was in charge of the administration for 4 years. Last time around, he had previous directors of national intelligence. There was nothing that could stop him from releasing this information 4 years ago. The suspicion of Democrats like Elissa Slotkin, who I just chatted with, was that this is just a big distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein news that Trump is allegedly in those files. That might be true, right? Maybe the White House wants something else to focus on right now. But the main takeaway here is we're getting a sense of what that retribution Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail looks like. Not only did they release this House intelligence report from the previous, I believe from 2019, which showed some of the back and forth between Obama IC officials and then CIA Director John Brennan. But they also argued that this was a smoking gun that showed how President Obama and his company were treasonous. Now, that's obviously, a legal term, and we'll see if they have the goods to back it up. But this was very much the White House trying to settle an old score. And frankly, I think that the one thing, despite some of the political noise that might be enduring from this report, is it puts the nail in the coffin of this old idea that there was an intelligence community consensus that Russia was backing Donald Trump and wanted to see him win in 2016. The takeaway here is that there was a whistleblower who said, we don't have evidence of that. Obviously, instead, Brennan and others went and made a different conclusion, which then led to all of the Russia investigations that crippled Donald Trump's first term in office.
Carl, one of the other developments, James Clapper was on CNN last night and said to the host that he has, in fact, lawyered up, and he has basically, because he's concerned that Trump is going to, the Trump administration, the Department of Justice is going to come after him. And Tulsi Gabbard said yesterday that she's referred this to the DOJ for criminal matters, and we learned that the DOJ has spun up a strike force which is sort of like a, it's almost like a SWAT, sounds like a special SWAT team to go, pursue these leads and this evidence. And Carl, you and I were talking before the show earlier this morning about, how this has gone over the course of the last few years. I mean, you look at what happened to folks in Donald Trump's administration. We were talking about Paul Manafort got thrown in jail. His 71-year-old wife got, they sent a SWAT team to his door and patted down his wife. They did the same thing to Roger Stone. Steve Bannon went to prison. Peter Navarro went to prison. Like, a lot of people were incarcerated based on a lot of this stuff that was spun up out of this Russia investigation. And so now the tables are turned, and it seems like folks in the sort of Trump supporters want their pound of flesh. Do you think they'll get it? Do you think that's where this is headed? And is that a good idea? Is it good for the country?
Well, Tom, those are different questions. It's going to be very hard for a jury in Washington, D.C. to get a jury in Washington, D.C. or New York City or to even convict a Democrat. It's not just the political class that's polarized. The country is polarized. With all due respect for my good friend Morris Fiorina, who made a career at Stanford about writing how politics is polarized, but Americans are pretty sensible. That's changing. It'd be hard to get a conviction. And conversely, they convicted Roger Stone on a very thin case. first of all, practically it's difficult to do. But the other question is, you raise, is it the right thing to do? I certainly understand why people like Roger Stone and his friends think that, these people should pay for what they did. These were process crimes that turned out maybe not even crimes at all, that the whole investigation was based on lies or supposition or guesswork, that they didn't really ever have the goods on Trump and Russia because there was nothing there to have, and that you're going to send a message that you can't do business this way, and that there'll be a price to pay for lying to the FISA court, for lying to the press, for leaking information that you knew wasn't true. I get that. It's not where I'm at, and I'll tell you, but you know this, Tom, because you know me, we've worked together all this time. I was never in favor of those prosecutions either. I think the criminalization of politics is a dangerous development. And while I understand the impulse of the Trump people to say, all right, now it's your turn in the barrel. Where does, I said this the other day on the show, where does this end? So then if Hakeem Jeffries gets in, we get another impeachment. If, the next president is not J.D. Vance, but one of the Democrats running, then they're under tremendous pressure to sic their Justice Department on these people. And then Tulsi Gabbard gets indicted. You said the analogy used earlier this week, Tom, was Hatfields and the McCoys. And I don't think that's any way to run a country. So I'd like to see these people show more temperance and more mercy than was shown to them.
And so that's why I asked Gabbard the question straight from Carl Cannon's notebook, which was, she has been an opponent of weaponization all of these years. What does she say to her critics who argue that this is now a race to the bottom by handing out, referrals to the DOJ? The answer from this White House thus far, when I press them about President Obama specifically, is they don't know what charge they want to bring him up on. They know that he has broad presidential immunity. They fought that case at the Supreme Court last year and won for Trump. But Brennan, Clapper, Comey, some of these other characters, they don't have that broad presidential immunity. Thus far, though, what we've seen is this White House, they've put it back in Attorney General Pam Bondi's lap. They told me yesterday, this is about finding the truth. This is about accountability. They haven't defined what that accountability is going to look like just yet. And the risk for them is the same risk in the Epstein case. If they overpromise and underdeliver, they're going to make their supporters awfully mad.
Once again, Carl, I find myself in the role of host of the show, which doesn't allow me to go on the media rant that I really want to go on. So I'm gonna let you have a crack at this, because part of this is the role the media has played. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but in terms of the prosecutions that took place and the framing of, you mentioned some of these were like process crimes, and you look at John Brennan, for example, it seems like he could easily be brought up on perjury charges because of the evidence that we now have. And, in past instances, when they spied on Congress, nothing happened. There was no accountability. Hunter Biden got a pardon, a blanket pardon for 10 years. There will be no accountability for him for any of the things that he did. So it seems like the weaponization has all sort of been moving in one direction. And now, part of this is because the media sort of moved it in that direction. And I just find that, at least what I've seen so far, is the media doesn't seem very curious or isn't running the same sort of volume or intensity of coverage about this as they did when it was, Trump's folks in the barrel.
Well, the media's on this side now of this debate. The New York Times and Washington Post both shared Pulitzer Prizes for stories that now look very weak.
Should they give those back, Carl?
That's a question. That's up to them. Walter Duranty was the great apologist for Stalin for the New York Times in the 30s. He's probably responsible for he contributed to the starvation deaths of millions of people. They didn't give that Pulitzer back. So there's a long line. So they're not. I don't believe in giving prizes back. It's kind of like tearing down statues to me, but you'd like them to be, but Tom, your point is right. You'd like them to be a little more curious about this and a little less defensive. Glenn Kessler, who's a fact checker for the Washington Post, he fact checked the Tulsi Gabbard stuff before and of course he was unconvinced by it.
Checked.
Yeah, but but before the Post had even covered it as a news story. So, these institutions, they've become a prisoner of their own sort of myopia, I think. Look, I know those people. I know them personally. I don't think they lie, but they were used by this Obama administration, and they should have been more skeptical, and they should be more open-minded now to what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. They should actually, I've said this before, they should reevaluate where they are on this. And some of these newspapers have done it. Jeff Bezos has done it, not with the news side, with the editorial side at the Washington Post. He's taken a lot of grief for that. The New York Times publisher has written, if you read his stuff just from the last 3 years, you think, oh, this is a great middle of the road newspaper. But they haven't quite gone the step you're talking about, Tom. They haven't really examined their own behavior in any public way.
All right. Well, we're going to have to, as unsatisfying as that is for me, Carl, we're going to have
to. Tom, for me, that's a rant.
That was pretty good, Carl. All right. We're going to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder, president of RCP. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more right after this. Phil, before we get going in this segment, I want to just sort of take a minute to preview later on in the second half of the show. You conducted an extended interview with Senator Elissa Slotkin. And tell us a little bit about, what people, if you stick around and listen to this, what they're going to hear from the senator.
Slotkin's a fascinating character because she won in a state that Donald Trump did. She's one of the few Democratic voices right now urging her party to embrace a new vision, to pump the brakes a bit. And at a moment when the party continues to go ever farther to the left, she's tacking towards the center. It's a pretty interesting conversation.
All right, great. Well, we'll look forward to that later on the show. Carl, we got to talk about the South Park thing. I mean, it's just too good, right? It's too good. So season 27 of South Park premiered last night. The premiere was delayed and then finally came out. And on the heels of an announcement that Paramount had just signed Trey Parker and Matt Stone to this huge deal. What was it, 1.5 billion or something, streaming rights? I mean, it's
streaming rights to all their previous 26 seasons.
Well, correct. Yeah. No, the whole catalog, which is, and look, I've been a huge South Park fan for a long time. I had little kids in the house, so I haven't watched it in a few years, right? Because it is filthy in a great way. I mean, these guys are geniuses. But so last night, they premiered this episode where they absolutely took it to not only Donald Trump, but also their employer in terms of Paramount and CBS. This is all the buzz for today. What did you see any of the clips, or did you watch the show? And what did you make of that?
Well, the opening scene, I mean, they hit the ground running. It's Donald Trump in the White House. He approaches this. They're doing a painting of him naked. And the painting has a very small penis. He immediately complains, of course. And the artist say, well, we drew this from the photograph, and he fires them on the spot. And then, the next scene, he's in bed with Satan, which is an homage to, they had, the
previous episode with Saddam Hussein.
They had Saddam Hussein in bed with Satan, like in the first season or early in the show, and then they're off and running, and everything. Trump is portrayed as a circus fat man, as I mentioned, with a small, not well endowed. He sues the town of South Park. The president does. He settles for $3.5 million, but that's not it. They also have to do like 50 public service announcements saying how great Trump is. There's these people in South Park who blaming each other for voting for him, and one guy says, yeah, I voted for him because I wanted to get all that woke stuff. But now this retarded faggot is just putting money in his own pockets. So that's Trey Parker and Matt Stone. They're, challenging political correctness and liberal shibboleths. And then, and on it goes. So the funniest bit to me was Cartman. Turns out he likes NPR. That's the conceit. And he says, did you hear the president of the United States canceled NPR? It's the funniest show ever. What's South Park? What's NPR? He says, that hilarious show where all the Jews and lesbians complain about stuff. And so it's vintage South Park, but with this added thing of really sort of daring Donald Trump to sue them.
Yeah. So, Phil, the White House released a statement responding to this episode, and it said in part, quote, "This show hasn't been relevant for over 20 years and is hanging on by a thread with uninspired ideas in a desperate attempt for attention." And it later says, no fourth-rate show can derail President Trump's hot streak. So what do you make of that? That sort of classic rhetoric from the White House. I think South Park's probably been, relevant for a lot longer than 20 years. But what do you make of that?
Do they know what the Streisand effect is? I mean, they're giving this more attention than it would have gotten already. I'm not certain what the thinking was behind that one. Maybe the president of the United States saw it while he's flipping through the channels. But look, I haven't seen the episode. I'm not the biggest South Park fan. That said, if you look at that show's long history, they have been merciless to people on both sides of the aisle and then around the globe. I mean, their mockery, for instance, of Chinese dictator Xi Jinping is pretty famous and got them kicked out of China. So I don't think that this knuckle rapping from the White House is going to change things for them. If anything, it's just going to draw more attention to the episode.
No, and certainly, I mean, you remember they made Team America, and I've actually been to and seen the Book of Mormon on Broadway, which is just absolutely filthy and hysterical at the same time. But the fact that they produce this, long-running show and they can do musicals. I mean, there's no question they're talented, Carl. But
also don't leave out Blasphemous. In this show,
Blasphemous.
The name of this show is the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus appears as a character at South Park High School. I don't want to give away the whole show. I hope people watch it. But Tom, you mentioned that statement that the White House issued. No fourth-rate show can derail the president's hot streak. They're not trying to derail anything, and they're not trying to appeal to both sides. There's a writer in Maine named Dustin Rolls, and he said, that's a misunderstanding. What they're trying to do, and I've always tried to do, is piss both sides off. That's what they're doing, and they're very good at it. And what they do is they point out hypocrisy on the right and the left. They're I think they're the greatest satirists we have.
Well, quickly, Carl. There was also a bit in there where they did like a 60 Minutes thing and showed basically I think it was supposed to be Leslie Stahl and maybe Scott Pelley sort of cowering now. Were you surprised that these guys went after their boss, their employers like this? It seemed a little it's very much in their mold, and something I guess you would expect them to do.
Well, look, you can think they're geniuses. You can think they're just very funny, as I do. You can think they're offensive. But anybody has to concede, whether you love them or hate them. They have courage. These guys are unafraid, and they're willing to take on all of the taboos of political life, not just the silly ones, but some of the ones that are good, all the guardrails. And edgy barely covers it.
That's an understatement.
Right. But they're not going to pull punches at their parent company. They're not going to do. And I imagine those contracts have been signed, though, and they're still going to get their money.
Phil, there's people who are saying this was a clear and transparent effort by Trey Parker and Martin to get the White House to get Donald Trump to sue them. Will he sue them? Will he take the bait?
I don't know. It will probably be good for business. I am pretty surprised that given Paramount is the owner of their company, that they went ahead and did this. To Cannon's point, I think the White House has more important things to do.
Wait a minute. Will he sue, Tom? What's the discovery going to be like? The tort is they don't have a small penis. He can't really sue them, I wouldn't think.
Okay. All right, we are going to leave it there. Stick around, because after this, Phil Wegman will be back with his extended interview with Senator Elissa Slotkin. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Philip Wegman, RCP White House reporter, and I'm joined now by freshman Senator Elissa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat who won her seat last year in a state that Donald Trump carried and who is now urging her party to embrace a new vision. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So I want to discuss what you're calling an economic war plan for the middle class. And I know you've made a lot of news by slaughtering some sacred cows, but you are a CIA veteran and you know this world very well. So I wanted to get your reaction to the recently declassified 2016 House Intelligence Report that was released by the administration that found that 2 CIA officers warned then Director John Brennan that the agency, quote, did not have direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected.
Yeah, I think my overall hot take on this is that it is completely obvious to me that this report came out the same day that President Trump's name appeared in the Epstein files. And President Trump had 4 years in his first administration to deal with this issue. He had many years after that to push this issue. He's had 6 months since he's been in office. My 10-year-old nephew understood that the release of this report was meant to distract us from the conversation that Donald Trump doesn't want to have, which is being in the files of a known pedophile. That being said, I mean, I think I haven't seen the actual report myself. I'm just struck by the timing first and foremost.
Yeah, and we are looking back nearly a decade at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, these are
right.
things that happened allegedly in 2015 and 2016. This was well before your time in Congress. But what do you make, I guess, of this White House argument that the IC and the Obama administration tried to undermine voters here? Is there anything to that? Are there any lessons learned with how the Russian probe began?
I think in the intelligence community, there's always debate among officers and analysts on issues. Like, that's how we work, right? I mean, you don't have clear, perfect information on, let's say, a terrorist group in Afghanistan or a militia in Iraq or something. You make assessments based on data points. So it doesn't surprise me at all that there was, debate about something so sensitive. What surprises me is that, or I guess doesn't surprise me, but is what, again, I'm not missing is the timing of this thing. And why didn't President Trump raise it in 4 years that he ran the intelligence community and the Department of Justice? I think it's good when there's healthy debate. I don't personally think that there's a question that the Russians wanted to influence our elections. They've been doing that since the Cold War. I mean, right? They've been trying to influence the outcome of our elections. What was different at that time was just the new role of social media and their ability at that time to buy ads on Facebook and put out content that, like, Michiganders in Howell, Michigan were reading, right? And that was different. You couldn't do that in 1956, and you could in 2016. And I think it's hard to know exactly, how many voters changed their votes because they saw a bunch of ads on Facebook. Facebook has now since banned foreigners from buying ads on their platform for political purposes. But there's no doubt that those ads existed. They were being pumped into Michigan because we're a swing state.
All right, back to Main Street. You've called the shrinking middle class an existential crisis, and you've pointed to overlapping and outdated housing regulations as the single biggest driver of the housing crisis.
Yeah.
How do you cut that red tape from the federal level?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to accept that, most regulation is put on, I'm sure, with very good intentions, right? We got to protect people's environmental issues or their local control or those kinds of things. But the cumulative effect is basically keeping many of our housing developers from building single family middle class homes. They will tell you openly, those housing developers, they want to make money. They will tell you, I can either make an apartment building or a McMansion. That's how I make money because of the permits, the requirements, the hoops I have to go through, the lawyers. So I want to take a complete blank slate look at housing restrictions from the federal level, certainly, and say, okay, what are we going to take off? What doesn't make sense? What's outdated? What's redundant? And then we got to have a really hard conversation at the local level, including in Michigan, right? There are a lot of local restrictions. People don't like when the character of their town starts to change. People don't like a ton of new housing all at the same time. But we have a housing crisis and we're short 4 million units. So I think it's looking at the federal level, owning the fact that we are overregulated in this space, and then having hard conversations at the local level as well.
Yeah, not a lot of Democrats talk like this, but it's a similar conversation to one that Ezra Klein of the New York Times is having.
Yeah.
In his book about abundance, he points out that blue states like California, Illinois, and New York, they've seen population loss, and then they've seen people move to red states where it's cheaper to live and frankly easier to build, like Arizona, Florida, and Texas. So is this a problem where blue states just need to flip a switch, or is there a blue state right now that's getting this right?
I will say it's interesting. I think that look, Michigan is a purple state, and we, I think, are struggling to figure out the right balance as well. I will tell you, the place where I see it getting done is in the city of Detroit. I mean, what we have done over 12 years, like hitting rock bottom, going bankrupt, and then recovering to a place with restaurants and hotels and jobs and headquarters coming back to the city, like it is transformed. It's still in progress, right? It's still going on the up and up, but that's a Democratic dominated city. The mayor was elected as a Democrat. And that to me is an example where a hardcore blue place can actually say, you know what? We need entrepreneurs. We need businesses. We need to partner with them, and we need to make things easier in some cases for them to build.
Second only to housing is probably concern about energy prices. You've called for an all of the above energy policy.
Yeah.
Does all of the above really include coal or fracking for natural gas or offshore drilling?
Yeah. I mean, look, just here's the deal. We have rapidly increasing demand for energy. Like everyone knows it. It's where no one's missing that, right? That we're going to be using more and more power. And then when you add in artificial intelligence and like to run Chat GPT, it just takes a lot more power than to like run your website of your favorite local shop, right? So, and that's why these giant data centers, very controversial, are being put up all over the country. So we're going to need more energy if we want to avoid rolling brownouts and blackouts a decade from now, 5 to 10 years from now. I know Michiganders will just not tolerate rolling brownouts and blackouts. Like that's not what we're going to do. So I want it all. I would love to transition and have cleaner energy, but what we need is just more. So I don't want like a fossil fuel plan or a renewable energy plan. I want all of the above. In Michigan, we're about to reopen for the first time in the country a nuclear power plant. And I also by the way, want the research and development on the cool stuff we haven't developed yet, right? I think we should just be like agnostic, try to transition off of dirty fuels, have a bridge to a cleaner future. But I'm not going to look at wind and solar as this president has done and been like, well, that's woke energy, and therefore I don't want it, and I'm going to take away all the incentives. I've got places in Michigan, real conservative places. You go up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, no one would ever think that that's a blue woke area, right? And they'll tell me, well, wait a minute, we've got a wind project that we've been working on. We got a solar project. We're about to get, kneecapped. So, but we're not woke. We just want more energy for the UP that really needs it. And so I think an all of the above approach is being realistic about the demands in the country.
Yeah, but that agnosticism, it certainly runs counter to what we've seen from the Democratic Party for the last decade. I mean, I'm thinking of your speech at the Center for American Progress, where you laid this out in stark terms. You said that anyone who tells you that we should scrap certain types of energy because it's woke doesn't actually give a crap about your costs. And then on the other side, though, you do have some Democrats and prominent voices like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who have called for an end to the fossil fuels and have called climate change an existential threat. So how do you balance that? I mean, what kind of hard conversation do you have to have in your own conference to have?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Look, part of the reason I gave a big speech talking about slaughtering sacred cows in my own party was to have this public conversation about areas of disagreement, right? And by the way, it's not, illegal for people to disagree. We can be adults and debate. That's part of why I gave the speech, was to spur
Might
that
be illegal
debate.
on Twitter.
Might be illegal on Twitter. You're right. I'm sorry. I should be careful what I say. I believe most Americans think we should be able to debate respectfully. And but we are not meant to agree on everything. We are meant to push and pull on each other and come up with better, stronger ideas because of it. So yes, I disagree with people in my party. I disagree with a lot of people on the Republican side who are just putting their thumb on the scale for fossil fuels only just to line their own pockets for their elections. So to me, that this is, we have to acknowledge the demand signal. And by the way, most Michiganders know exactly what happens when we have a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. Their prices go up. And there is no getting around the fact that the existential biggest issue we have, whether you're in Arkansas or New York City, is the cost of living and being able to save and have that American dream. And a lot of people just don't believe that's a thing anymore. And that's a problem for the country.
Another sacred cow is immigration. I mean, you took it head on in that speech. You've said that every country deserves to know who and what is coming across its borders. In the last administration, we saw border apprehensions spike around 250,000 a month during the Biden presidency. And that's not even counting getaways.
Not apprehension. Sorry, you said apprehensions. You mean crossings?
Or encounters, excuse me. So do you think that in this area, Biden failed? Was there not enough attention put on the border?
There was, okay, look, I would say neither administration, the current or previous, had an immigration plan. They couldn't say with a straight face, and Trump cannot say today that he has an immigration plan. And that plan, like, this is America. We need desperately immigrants coming to our country. Everyone listening to this pretty much is an immigrant to this country. And you talk to our farmers, you talk to our engineering firms, you talk to employers in tourism. We need legal, vetted immigrant labor that comes here legally, right? We also, like every other country in the world, deserve to know exactly who and what is coming in our borders, and we have the right to say no. If you're here illegally, you shouldn't be. We're a border state in Michigan. We deal with this every day. Our border's not a mess. You know, it's been, good Michiganders keep it running smoothly. And we haven't seen, obviously, waves of people trying to come over our rivers and our lakes. But I think the point is that rational adults could figure out a thoughtful, decent immigration policy. The last administration didn't have that and didn't have it on the border. Right? It didn't have a plan. This administration thinks it's all border, just close the border, and that's an immigration policy. Meanwhile, the Farm Bureau of America is like, excuse me, do you want us to keep farming? Because we need people here. So I think we need a rational adult conversation about immigration, and both parties have been guilty of kind of sitting in their corners and not being serious.
On the border security front, I know you voted against what Republicans call the One Big Beautiful Bill, but they appropriated something like $46 billion for the border wall. Once it's built, would you keep it?
Oh, yeah. I think their money was for much more than a wall, right? 10,000 new ICE agents, huge amounts of money for facilities. It's definitely not just the wall. Yeah, I mean, when Trump started the wall in his first term, I don't think, again, a wall is not an immigration policy, but if you're going to put up a wall, I'm going to keep a wall. Sure, I'm not going to tear down a wall that's built because, again, a border is a border. And that doesn't mean that when people are fearing persecution and death, like my great-grandfather, when he came to this country, shouldn't have a place in America. But you also can't just walk across the border and expect that you're going to be here for the next 20 years. That's not how any country should run immigration policy.
You know, Senator, you're making this case, I think, for moderation, and the Free Press, you might quibble with their characterization, but they wrote this profile of you, calling you the Democrat who wants her party to be normal. But what I'm curious is whether or not the pendulum can swing back in the other direction. I mean, Zoran Mamandi, he's the Democratic Socialist in New York. He's running for governor there, and he's running on government-run grocery stores. He's been endorsed by, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Also, this week, AOC hauled in something like $15.4 million. That's more than House Speaker Mike Johnson. It feels like the energy is on the left right now, not the center. Do you see that trend line continuing?
Well, I think the energy and certainly the online energy likes fighting and conflict and drama and quippy, snappy sentences. And for a lot of us who consider ourselves pragmatists, that's not where I spend my time, right? I feel passionately and I will push back vehemently on what I believe is a threat to our democracy. But I'm not getting in online fights with people. That's not my bag. But the online world definitely is attracted to the corners, like the polls, the far left, the far right. I think the reason I'm sitting in front of you as a senator and not as, a former member of the House who failed in the last election is because I just don't believe that Twitter represents America. I do not believe that the average American, certainly not the average Michigander, is looking for that kind of polarization. The average person wants their government to work. They want it to be better. They want strong economic security, national security, and they want their democracy there for their kids. They're not screaming on Twitter. The average person, it's very hard to separate the loudest from the majority. And the loudest are not the majority, at least not in my state.
Yeah, you've called out Democrats for vilifying success and said that the message instead should be, you play by the rules. We want you to make as much money as possible. Or I think your exact phrase was, we want you to be wildly successful. Let's take on one of those Twitter tropes that has come from the left, where they say that every billionaire is a policy failure. Is that fair? Is that right? Is that counterproductive?
Again, billionaires are something I don't know that people could have imagined, 50 years ago. We have 8 of them in Michigan. So we're, again, in the spirit of are we talking about issues that affect the average person? No, right? There's 8 of them. And Betsy DeVos is one of them. I mean, I could probably name all 8 of them. The truth is, I don't know whether a billionaire is something that, should exist or shouldn't exist. They exist. Okay. They exist. But what I'm talking about is, frankly, a little bit more grassroots, which is the guy who owns my local grocery store in Holly, Michigan. Okay. An immigrant, by the way, to the United States, Indian American, and he owns a bunch of grocery stores across Michigan, and he is successful. And he came to me and said, I feel like the Democratic Party doesn't want me to succeed. Like they want to punish me for my success. And I've worked really hard to get here and to succeed in America. And I want to be in a group of people that support that. And I'm the product of a family business, right? I had a 4-generation hot dog business in my family. And if that business was still running, I'd be in that business and not in the Senate business. And so I'm only here because of that my great-grandparents and grandparents led the American dream and allowed me to do this. So a small businessman like Vishal in Holly, Michigan is different than the 8 people who are billionaires. They should be giving back in a very different way. And by the way, they should pay their fair share in taxes. Okay. Betsy DeVos pays less in taxes than my mechanic. That is screwed up. That is screwed up. But should you be allowed to be wildly successful? Of course. We want you to succeed beyond your wildest dreams because that is the American dream.
You've described this impression that some voters have of the Democratic Party as weak and woke. And that reminds me of this ad that the Trump campaign ran to great effect last year against the vice president at the time. The tagline was, Trump is for you, Harris is for they, them. How should Democrats have responded to that attack?
So look, I think the thing that President Trump picked up on and won on was the fact that this last election was a pocketbook election. People were feeling underwater with the cost of living. They feel like they're working hard but can't get ahead. They can't provide for their kids what was provided to them. And you just had to look at yard signs, right? Literally, Trump's yard sign said, Trump, lower taxes, Harris, higher taxes. I mean, they were as clear as possible. And his ads were just relentless about that issue. Whereas I think on the Democratic side, and again, Kamala Harris had a very short time to get her campaign together, people didn't know what her priorities were, right? If you prioritize everything, no one knows what you really care about. And so I was knocking on doors, Democratic doors in Michigan, a little more than a year ago. And people were saying to me, look, I'm a Democrat and I do not like Donald Trump, but I just need more money in my pocket. And I think that he's going to get me more money in my pocket. And
well, On this identity politics question, I mean, did Democrats go too far on the transgender issue? The other day, you had Rahm Emanuel saying that he believed that a man could not become a woman, and then he joked that he was going to have to go into the witness protection program for saying that.
So I think that voters absolutely feel like the Democratic Party cared more about identity issues than pocketbook issues, and that contributed to our loss. Absolutely. I just don't even think that's a question. That doesn't mean we give up on our principles and our rights. I mean, my mom came out as a gay woman in 1986, and I grew up in a gay home. And like, you're not going to get me to say like, gay people need to go back in the closet. What I'm saying is, again, speak to the majority of people, speak to the needs of the broadest group of people. And that's the way you're going to bring people into your party, your campaign, your election. And that is what I think, like, if we care about winning, and in this environment, that's what matters. If you care about pushing back on Donald Trump, right? Winning the midterms, winning the next presidential election, you got to speak to the broad group of people and what people are sitting around at night, staying up at night, worried about, not just about the identity issues that are also important, but just not as prevalent for every American.
Alpha Energy, Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions, they have it up until they lost to Washington in the playoffs. But what do you mean when you say the Democrats need Alpha Energy? Did President Biden have it? Does Donald Trump have it? Why do we want politicians to have Alpha Energy?
So, maybe it's because I'm a Michigander, a Midwesterner, and we're so, sports is like our religion, right? So we all watch sports all the time. We want to know that someone has a plan, that there's a confidence in an actionable plan of not just defense, not just pointing at the other team and saying they're bad, or pointing at Donald Trump and saying he's not good, but an offense. What are we going to do? What's our vision? What's our plan to lead from through the dark tunnel and into the light? And you don't need to get everything perfect. You don't need to have perfect 18-point policy plans that you can show everyone on your websites. You need to know in your bones how to get us through this moment in our history. And there's a confidence and an alpha energy by that I associate with that. And I think that Democrats, many have lost that we're so careful around each other, that we don't want to say the wrong thing, that we want to have consensus. We want everyone to feel good at the party. But the reality is, in order to get us out of this mess, we have to have a plan. And when you plan, everyone knows this, not everybody gets their idea. Not everyone gets their trophy, right? And I just think that's what I mean by alpha energy. And this to me is an understandable thing for a lot of Midwesterners and certainly Michiganders. I mean, Dan Campbell is like the epitome of this. He's going to yell at you when you are wrong and hug you and cry when you do something great. But he has a plan, and he took the Lions from the toilet to, damn near going to the Super Bowl. And this year we're going to do it. So we have that example. We need to emulate that in the Democratic Party.
Well, as our time comes to a close here, just quickly, did President Biden have that alpha energy that was needed?
I think he was missing that. And that's not to say he's not a great public servant, that he didn't serve his country for many years. But that forcefulness is what the American public needed, because they were so worried about their pocketbooks. I think history will have to tell us, sort of in the span of history, what he did a lot of really important things legislatively. He did buy American stuff that still affects us deeply. But sometimes it's also about your persona and what you project, and knowing and giving people confidence that there's a plan to get from A to B. And that's, to me, what Democrats need.
Final question. Let's look forward here. Do Democrats have a leader right now?
Oh, I mean, I think because we don't have the White House, the House, the Senate, we don't have a single leader. That's for sure. We have obviously impressive governors and impressive young leaders and the whole thing. But I think this is why I've been encouraging, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to run for president to come out from the woodwork now and start airing yourself out, start talking to people, start seeing how it goes. Because I think people are looking for that next generation of leadership. They
Is
want to
that what
know.
you're doing right now, Senator? Are you
Me?
interested?
Oh.
Is that what you're doing right now?
Right now, I'm 6 months. I gave my maiden speech as a senator yesterday. So I'm still like figuring out, where the rooms are in the Senate. But I will be honest that I think that there could be a stronger voice for Midwestern leadership in general among the sort of solar system of elected Democrats. I think the Midwest is underrepresented to me, if my job is to come on things like this and talk about what the Midwest wants to see from elected leaders, I'm going to do that every time.